June 4, 1942. Midway Atoll. The sky is cloudless, the Pacific stretching calm and endless. But for the Japanese carriers cutting white wakes across the blue, calm is an illusion. The ocean is holding its breath. At 10:20 a.m., aboard Akagi, flagship of Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, sailors move with rehearsed precision. Planes are being refueled, rearmed, prepared for the next strike on Midway Island. On Kaga, armor-piercing bombs are rolled across hangar decks, crews sweating as they handle explosives that could tear their own ship apart if mishandled. On Soryu, mechanics tighten bolts, shouting over the roar of engines. The morning sun glares off polished decks, off steel rising in gleaming pagodas. The Japanese fleet is confident. Their air cover dominates the skies. American resistance has been scattered and broken, or so they believe. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you love your country, make sure to hit subscribe. At 10:22 a.m., lookouts squint skyward. Tiny black dots appear against the sun. At first, they seem like birds. Then they grow, sharper, louder. Engines scream as they cut downward. Dive bombers. American SBD Dauntlesses. The alarm shrieks across every deck. Enemy planes! Enemy planes! Voices rise, frantic, colliding with the clang of boots and the roar of engines. Anti-aircraft gunners race to stations. Hands fumble shells into magazines. The sky above, moments ago serene, is now alive with death. From 20,000 feet, the bombers tip forward into near-vertical dives. Sunlight glints off wings as they plummet, air screaming past their cockpits. Pilots grit their teeth, hands locked on controls, eyes fixed on the tiny grey rectangles of decks. Below, inside the hangars, chaos erupts. Fuel lines snake across floors. Bombs lie exposed, waiting to be loaded. Men sprint to secure what they can, too late. At 10:24, the first bomb strikes Kaga. It punches through her flight deck, detonating deep in the hangar. A sheet of fire erupts, swallowing mechanics, igniting fuel tanks. A second bomb follows, then a third. Explosions tear through the carrier, throwing steel high into the air. Flames lick upward, consuming planes where they sit. Men run ablaze, screaming. The great ship shudders, her decks turned into an inferno. Across the formation, Akagi reels. A bomb slams through her midsection, detonating near the command center. Admiral Nagumo himself feels the deck buckle beneath his feet. Fire spreads instantly, roaring down passageways, devouring oxygen. Smoke boils into the sky, black against the morning blue. On Soryu, it is the same story. Bombs fall like thunderbolts from heaven. 1, 2, 3 direct hits. Hangars erupt in fireballs, planes tumble into the sea. Bulkheads crumple. The carrier groans like a wounded beast, listing as her crew fights desperately to contain the inferno. 5 minutes. That is all it takes. By 10:27 a.m., 3 of Japan's 4 frontline carriers, the same carriers that had bombed Pearl Harbor just 6 months earlier, are burning wrecks. On deck, Japanese sailors stare in disbelief. Some shout orders, others freeze, unable to comprehend. They had been told the enemy was weak, scattered, defeated. Yet from the sun itself, death had fallen. A petty officer, clutching a fire hose with trembling hands, mutters a prayer as flames roar back at him. This cannot be happening. But it is. Aboard the American dive bombers, pilots pull up, ears ringing, eyes stinging from smoke. Behind them, the ocean is alive with fire and black columns of smoke. The carriers they had feared, the pride of the Imperial Navy, are gutted in less than 5 minutes. Commander Wade McCluskey of USS Enterprise, leading the strike, can hardly believe it himself. Over the radio, his voice crackles with awe. 3 burning, 3 carriers hit. God Almighty, we got them. Back aboard Yorktown and Enterprise, crews listening to radio reports erupt in cheers. Men embrace, slap each other's backs, shout until their throats burn. But even amid celebration, a sober truth lingers. The battle is not over. One carrier, Hiryu, still sails, and she will strike back. But in this moment, the tide has turned. In 5 minutes of fire and fury, the myth of Japanese invincibility has been shattered. But how did it come to this? How did Japan, triumphant, after Pearl Harbor, stretching its empire across half the Pacific, find itself burning in the waters off a tiny atoll? To understand those 5 minutes, we must go back to 1941. Back to the moment when Japan's empire seemed unstoppable and the United States was still reeling from disaster. The road to Midway did not begin on June 4, 1942. It began on December 7, 1941, at Pearl Harbor. December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor burns. Battleships lie broken, their hulls split by torpedoes, their decks shattered by bombs. The smoke rises like funeral banners over the Pacific. In Tokyo, cheers erupt. In Washington, shock hardens into rage. Japan has awakened the giant. But in the months that follow, the giant stumbles. While America mourns its dead and scrambles to rebuild, Japan surges forward like a tidal wave. By the first half of 1942, the rising sun spreads across maps like spilled ink. Malaya has fallen. Singapore, once called the Gibraltar of the Yeo, East, surrenders in humiliation. The Philippines are crushed, tens of thousands of American and Filipino soldiers forced onto the Bataan Death March. The Dutch East Indies, with its rich oil fields, falls into Japan's hands. Guam, Wake Island, Hong Kong, all taken. Everywhere Japan strikes, victory follows. From Burma to the Solomons, from the Aleutians to Java, the Imperial Navy seems unstoppable, and at the heart of these victories are Japan's carriers: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, Zuikaku. 6 floating airfields that had humbled Pearl Harbor now range freely across the Pacific, their planes devastating enemies with merciless precision. In the spring of 1942, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of the Combined Fleet, looks at the map and sees opportunity. The Americans are reeling. Their battleships lie crippled. Their morale is shaken. Strike again, decisively, and perhaps the United States will sue for peace. But Yamamoto knows the truth. America's industrial might cannot be underestimated. Given time, the US will rebuild, rearm, and drown Japan in steel and fire. Time is the enemy. The answer? Force a decisive battle. Destroy America's remaining carriers, the only ships that can challenge Japan's advance. If those carriers are sunk, the Pacific will belong to the rising sun. Yamamoto's eyes fall on a tiny speck in the vast Pacific. Midway Atoll. 2 small islands, barely 6 square miles of land combined, palm trees, sand, coral reefs. On paper, worthless, but strategically, everything. Midway lies 1,000 miles northwest of Hawaii, a lonely outpost guarding the approach to America's home, base at Pearl Harbor. If Japan takes Midway, Hawaii itself is threatened. From there, Japan could launch raids, force negotiations, even bring the war to America's doorstep. To Yamamoto, Midway is the perfect bait. The Americans cannot afford to lose it. They must respond. And when they do, Japan's carriers will be waiting, hidden in the vastness of the sea, ready to annihilate them. It is a brilliant plan, bold, decisive, and fatally flawed. In Tokyo, the High Command debates Yamamoto's proposal. Some officers argue for caution. Japan has stretched itself too thin, its supply lines too long. But Yamamoto's voice carries the weight of Pearl Harbor's triumph. His plan is approved, yet behind the confidence lurks arrogance. Japanese intelligence believes the Americans are broken. Their carrier force is thought to be weak, hesitant, unwilling to risk open battle. In reality, 3 American carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and the hastily repaired Yorktown, are ready. They may be battered, but they are not broken. Worse, still for Japan, their plan is sprawling, complex, and overconfident. The fleet is divided into multiple task forces, the carriers striking Midway, a diversionary force toward the Aleutians. Battleships held far to the rear. Yamamoto disperses his power across thousands of miles, believing surprise is on his side. But surprise has already slipped away. Far from the roar of engines and the flash of bombs, in a quiet basement at Pearl Harbor, another battle is being fought. Not with guns, but with pencils and radio intercepts. The cryptographers of Station Hypo, led by Commander Joseph Rochefort, hunch over papers and codebooks. For months, they have chipped away at JN-25, the complex Japanese naval code. Slowly, piece by piece, they pull back the veil. By May 1942, Rochefort is confident. The Japanese are planning a strike on AF. But what is AF? Guesses abound. Perhaps Hawaii, perhaps the Aleutians. Rochefort proposes a trick. He orders Midway to transmit a false message. Their water distillation plant has broken. Days later, Japanese intercepts report AF is short on water. The trap is confirmed. AF is Midway. Now Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, knows exactly where Yamamoto will strike. Instead of charging blindly, Nimitz prepares a trap of his own. Enterprise and Hornet sail from Pearl Harbor. Yorktown limps back into service after being mauled at Coral Sea, and all three converge northeast of Midway. Hidden in the vast Pacific, beyond the range of Japanese scouts, they wait. On Midway itself, Marines dig trenches, string barbed wire, camouflage their positions. Pilots ready their Wildcats and Dauntlesses, men who know they may never return. The island garrison braces for impact, aware that they are the bait in a battle larger than themselves. Meanwhile, the Japanese fleet sails with supreme confidence. Their carriers brim with experienced pilots, the very men who struck Pearl Harbor and swept the Pacific. To them, Midway will be another easy victory, a stepping stone toward crushing America's spirit once and for all. But unseen, America is waiting, and in that waiting lies destiny. If you're with me so far, tell me in the comments, what's your country's name? By early June, the Pacific is quiet, a deceptive calm. Across thousands of miles, two great navies converge, their courses set, their fates intertwined. The Japanese believe they are the hunters, drawing the enemy into their trap. But in truth, they are walking into an ambush more deadly than they can imagine. In just days, the calm sea will erupt in fire. Planes will scream from the sky, ships will burn, and men will die. And in a span of mere minutes, the course of the Pacific War will change forever. The rising sun sails toward Midway, but the ocean is already waiting. The Pacific is vast, so vast that entire fleets can vanish into its horizon, swallowed by distance and silence. To find an enemy here is like searching for a single shadow in a storm. But in the spring of 1942, America had a weapon that did not float, did not fly, did not fire. It listened. Beneath the warm Hawaiian sun, in a basement at Pearl Harbor, men fought a war no one could see. They were the cryptographers of Station Hypo, a team of codebreakers led by Commander Joseph Rochefort. The rooms smelled of sweat, tobacco, and endless coffee. Air buzzed with the hum of radios, the scratch of pencils, the shuffle of papers. Men bent over intercepted messages written in Japanese code. Endless strings of numbers, groups of 5, meaningless at first glance. But to Rochefort and his team, every number was a crack in the wall, a puzzle piece that, once placed, might reveal Japan's next move. For months, they had chipped away at JN-25, the Imperial Navy's main operational code. Every day, every hour, they sifted through fragments, working by hand, piecing together tiny shards of intelligence. Slowly, the outline of Japan's plans began to emerge. By May 1942, Rochefort was certain. The Japanese were planning a massive strike against a target they called AF. But what was AF? Some believed it was Hawaii. Others argued for the Aleutians. The answer mattered everything, because wherever Japan struck, America had to be ready. Rochefort's team devised a test. Midway's garrison was ordered to send an uncoded message reporting that their water distillation plant had broken down. Hours later, Japanese intercepts reported that AF is short on water. The riddle was solved. AF was Midway. Rochefort's triumph was not celebrated with parades or medals. It was acknowledged with a nod, a muttered, "Good work," and then folded into Admiral Chester Nimitz's strategy. But in truth, it was one of the greatest intelligence victories in history. For the first time, America knew not just where Japan would strike, but when. Nimitz was a calm man, steady, deliberate. Sitting in his headquarters at Pearl Harbor, maps spread across tables, he understood the enormity of what lay ahead. Japan was coming with 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, the same ships that had struck Pearl Harbor. Each carried dozens of veteran pilots, men who had trained for years, who had already tasted victory across half the Pacific. Against them, Nimitz had only 3 carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and the battered Yorktown, hastily repaired after Coral Sea. The odds were desperate. But Nimitz had something the Japanese did not: foreknowledge. He placed his carriers northeast of Midway, hidden in the open ocean. There they would wait like wolves in the tall grass, watching, waiting, ready to strike when the Japanese least expected it. On Midway itself, the garrison braced for impact. Marines dug trenches in coral sand, strung barbed wire across beaches, and loaded machine guns into bunkers. Pilots checked their Wildcats and Dauntlesses, patched together with whatever parts they could find. Bombers were rolled out onto cracked runways, their crews fully aware that their odds of returning were slim. Letters home were written and sealed. Chaplains led prayers. The island, just 6 square miles of coral and palm trees, was about to become the center of the Pacific War. One Marine scribbled in his diary, "We are the bait. I hope the hook is sharp." Meanwhile, the Japanese fleet steamed toward Midway with supreme confidence. Admiral Nagumo believed surprise was on his side. His scouts had failed to detect the American carriers. His pilots believed their air superiority was unshakable. But the truth was darker. Every move Japan made was being tracked. Every message they sent was intercepted. Every plan they whispered was already known. Japan thought it was the hunter. In reality, it was the hunted. In the final days of May, the Pacific was deceptively quiet. The carriers slid across the horizon like floating fortresses, their crews busy with drills, their planes gleaming in the sun. On Midway, tension grew with each passing hour. And at Pearl Harbor, Nimitz waited, watching the clock, knowing the moment was close. The trap was set, but traps only work if sprung at the right moment. June 3rd, 1942. The first sighting came at dawn on June 3rd. American reconnaissance planes spotted Japanese transports steaming toward Midway. Reports crackled over radios, the tension on Midway rising instantly. Sirens blared, pilots scrambled. The Japanese strike would come at dawn the next day. That night, the men on Midway could barely sleep. Some lay awake in sweltering huts, staring at the ceiling fans. Others wrote hurried letters, folded them carefully and tucked them away, knowing they might never be sent. In the distance, they could almost feel the hum of engines across the dark Pacific, the silent approach of Japan's fleet. The Americans knew the storm was coming. The Japanese thought the sky was theirs. But within 24 hours, the fate of the Pacific would hang in the balance, and within 5 minutes, history would turn. June 4th, 1942. The first light of dawn breaks over Midway Atoll. The horizon glows faint orange. The surf crashes against coral reefs, and seabirds rise into the air as if sensing what is to come. Inside the bunkers, Marines wipe sweat from their brows, their fingers tight on machine guns. On the runways, Wildcats and Dauntlesses sit ready, pilots strapped in, engines rumbling, hearts pounding. The moment has arrived. At 4:30 a.m., Admiral Nagumo gives the order. From Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, waves of aircraft thunder into the sky. Bombers glint in the morning sun, fighters roar upward to escort them. The rising sun shines on wings as they form up, a black swarm headed for Midway. At 6:30 a.m., the island is in sight. The attack begins. Bombs scream down from the sky. Hangars erupt in fireballs. Fuel tanks burst into rolling columns of black smoke. Barracks are torn apart, sending splinters of wood and steel flying like shrapnel. Marines in foxholes fire back desperately with machine guns, tracers streaking into the sky. Pilots from Midway claw upward in outdated Buffalo fighters, hopelessly outmatched. One squadron is torn apart in minutes, planes spiraling into the sea. Still, they fight. A Wildcat slams its guns into a bomber, the Japanese plane bursting into flame before cartwheeling into the lagoon. Another Marine pilot, his plane shredded, dives straight into the enemy formation, scattering bombers before his fighter disintegrates. By the time the Japanese withdraw, Midway smolders. Dozens of defenders are dead, aircraft destroyed, runways cratered. But the island still stands. And crucially, American carriers remain untouched, hidden, waiting. If you're enjoying the story so far, tell me in the comments what you liked most. And don't forget to subscribe. Back aboard Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, orders crackle across radios. The time has come. Torpedo Squadron 8 from USS Hornet launches first. 15 planes, lumbering TBD devastators, outdated and slow. The pilots know their odds. They fly anyway. The Pacific stretches endless beneath them as they descend toward the Japanese fleet. Ahead, the black dots of enemy ships swell larger. Anti-aircraft guns open fire, filling the air with bursts of black smoke. Japanese Zero fighters scream down from the sky, guns blazing. The devastators keep coming. One by one, they fall. Planes burst into flame, cartwheel into the sea. Pilots and gunners vanish in plumes of spray. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron, leading the squadron, presses on even as his wingmen are cut to pieces. His plane is hit, trailing smoke, but he refuses to turn back. He lines up on Kaga, drops his torpedo, and vanishes in a fireball. Not one plane of Torpedo Squadron 8 survives. 15 aircraft, 30 men, all gone. Their sacrifice buys seconds, nothing more. But seconds that will matter. Minutes later, Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise arrives. 14 planes. They meet the same fate. Zeros dive. Tracers tear through wings. Engines explode. Only 4 make it back. Then Torpedo Squadron 3 from Yorktown charges in. 12 planes. Again, they are cut down. By the time they turn for home, 10 are gone. In less than an hour, 41 American torpedo bombers have been destroyed. Scores of men are dead. Survivors limp back to their carriers. Cockpits riddled with bullet holes. Fuel leaking into the sea. On the decks of the Japanese carriers, sailors cheer. The Americans have thrown their best and lost everything. Not a single torpedo has struck home. Admiral Nagumo watches with satisfaction. His fleet stands untouched. His decks hum with activity. Crews preparing the next strike to finish Midway once and for all. It seems Japan owns the sky. 7:15 a.m. Nagumo orders the second strike rearmed. For another blow on Midway, torpedoes out, bombs in. At 07:28, a late scout report hints at American ships. By 07:45, he reverses himself, rearm again for ship attack. Fuel lines stay connected. Armed planes jam the elevators. It's the most vulnerable moment a carrier can know, and it's about to be exploited. But above the chaos, unnoticed by most, something has shifted. The waves of American torpedo bombers, slaughtered as they were, forced the Japanese Zeros down. The sky above the carriers, the high blue where bombers might descend, is momentarily unguarded. Nagumo does not see it. His lookouts do not see it, but the Americans are coming. 55 a.m. Aboard Enterprise, dive bomber pilots sit tight in their cockpits. They've been circling for hours, low on fuel, searching desperately for the Japanese fleet. Morale is fraying. The Pacific stretches empty in every direction. Then, just as hope begins to fade, Commander Wade McCluskey spots something. The faint wake of a lone Japanese destroyer racing at high speed. He makes a decision. He follows. Minutes later, the horizon breaks open. There they are, the Japanese carriers. McCluskey leads his Dauntlesses into position. From Yorktown, another wave of bombers approaches. From Enterprise, more follow. Dozens of aircraft form above the Pacific, their silhouettes sharp against the sun. Below, the Japanese are unaware. Their flight decks are crowded with fueled planes, bombs and torpedoes stacked, crews rushing in frantic preparation. It is the most vulnerable moment a carrier can face. And the Americans have arrived at the perfect time. At 10:20 a.m., McCluskey gives the order. The dive bombers tip forward, their noses angling down into the glare. Engines scream, wind howls, pilots grit their teeth as they dive into the abyss. From below, lookouts finally spot them. Shouts erupt, sirens wail, anti-aircraft guns swivel upwards, spitting fire. But it is too late. The sky has opened. Death is falling. And in the next 5 minutes, the Pacific War will change forever. At 10:22 a.m., the Pacific sky tears open. From 20,000 feet above, American dive bombers plunge like hawks, their wings screaming as they fold into steep dives. The roar of engines drowns out thought. The slipstream howls against canopies. Below, 4 Japanese carriers stretch across the ocean, their decks crowded with planes, bombs, fuel hoses. It is the perfect target, the perfect moment, the one chance. Lieutenant Dick Best, leading Bombing Squadron 6 from Enterprise, lines up his Dauntless on the carrier Kaga. The ship fills his windshield, growing larger every second. He holds steady as flak blossoms black across the sky. Tracers zip past his canopy. The ocean spins dizzy in the corner of his vision. His altimeter spins down, 15,000 feet, 10,000, 8,000. Sweat stings his eyes. At 1,500 feet, he releases. The bomb drops, a black shadow slicing the air. Seconds later, impact. The deck of Kaga erupts. Bombs and fuel ignite in a chain reaction, flames racing across the wooden planks. Aircraft explode where they stand, sending jagged shrapnel into crews desperately trying to fight the fires. The carrier shudders, smoke belching skyward. More Dauntlesses follow. Explosions rip open her hangars, secondary blasts hurl planes into the sea. By the time the first wave pulls out, Kaga is a floating inferno. Meanwhile, Best pulls his Dauntless upward, scanning for his next target. He sees Kaga burning fiercely. Too many bombers are already diving on her. He banks hard, shifting, toward another ship, Akagi, Admiral Nagumo's flagship. Only 2 Dauntlesses are lined up on her. Best dives again, the ocean rushing up, the carrier filling his sights. He steadies, releases. One bomb strikes square on the flight deck, near the elevators. The blast tears through to the hangar below, where fueled planes sit armed with torpedoes and bombs. The detonation is catastrophic. Flames engulf the ship instantly, rolling down her length like a tidal wave. Crewmen scramble with fire hoses, but it is hopeless. The flagship is burning to the waterline. To the northeast, another group, from Yorktown, bears down on Soryu. Her decks, too, are cluttered with planes refueling, bombs stacked, the crew preparing a second strike. The first Dauntless dives. Bomb after bomb slams into her deck. Explosions rip through hangars. Smoke gushes from ruptured seams. Fire engulfs. Men still at their posts. Sailors leap into the sea, their uniforms aflame. In minutes, Soryu is crippled. Her engines fail. Her decks buckle. Her crew fighting desperately for survival. On every ship, the scene is apocalyptic. In the hangars, where bombs had been laid out for rearming, fires meet fuel lines. The mixture is gasoline and TNT. Explosions. rip through compartments, hurling bodies, shattering steel. Planes packed wing to wing ignite like kindling, their aluminum frames melting, their ammunition cooking off in deafening bursts. Survivors stagger through smoke-filled corridors, skin burned, lungs choking. Some claw at hatches that will not open. Others leap blindly into the sea, their bodies breaking on the waves. The carriers are not just machines, they are floating cities. And now, those cities are burning alive. On Akagi's bridge, Admiral Nagumo stares at the flames consuming his flagship. Only minutes earlier, his officers were discussing the next strike. Now, his flight deck is gone, his planes destroyed before they ever left the ship. Reports flood in. Kaga burning out of control. Soryu crippled. Akagi struck beyond saving. 3 carriers, half of Japan's naval air power, destroyed in less than 5 minutes. Nagumo grips the railing, his face pale. It is unthinkable, impossible, and yet it is happening before his eyes. Of Japan's 4 carriers, only Hiryu escapes untouched, her deck miraculously clear of bombs. She veers, north fleeing the chaos, her air group still intact. For now, she survives. But the devastation around her is undeniable. From above, the dauntless pilots watch in awe and disbelief. Smoke billows into the sky, black columns towering miles high. Flames leap hundreds of feet, visible even from their dizzying altitude. Radio chatter fills with stunned voices. They're burning! 3 carriers hit! 3 carriers burning! Dick Best, circling above, whispers into his mask. This is it. We've done it. But victory has come at a price. Dozens of torpedo bombers lie at the bottom of the sea, their crews gone forever. Their suicidal runs, though futile in damage, pulled Japanese fighters low, left the sky clear for the dive bombers. Without their sacrifice, the attack might have failed. On the decks of Enterprise and Yorktown, surviving pilots stagger back, faces blackened with smoke, eyes wide with shock. Mechanics swarm their planes, pulling them down into safety. Some aircraft never return. Empty spaces on the flight deck mark the men who did not make it back. By 10:30 a.m., the Pacific has transformed. Where 4 carriers once dominated, 3 now burn uncontrollably, their decks shattered, their air groups destroyed. Japan's veteran pilots, men who had flown at Pearl Harbor, are trapped on decks engulfed in fire. Many never reach their planes. Historians would later call it 5 minutes that changed the world. And it was no exaggeration. In that narrow window, the balance of power in the Pacific shifted irreversibly. The United States had gone from hunted to hunter, from outnumbered to ascendant. On Kaga, sailors tried desperately to fight the blaze. They drag hoses across decks already slick with oil, but the pumps lose pressure as the ship lists. Explosions tear open compartments. Ammunition cooks off in rapid bursts, shredding bulkheads. By noon, her fate is sealed. On Soryu, survivors abandon ship as the inferno rages. Men jump in waves, some swimming for hours before rescue. Their carrier, once the pride of Japan, sinks by afternoon. On Akagi, Nagumo is forced to abandon his flagship. By evening, she too slips beneath the waves. In a single morning, the core of Japan's striking power is gone. But the battle is not finished. To the north, Hiryu steams away, her decks alive with activity. Pilots strap in, engines roar, bombers line up for launch. She has not been struck, and her commanders are determined to strike back with everything they have. The Americans have dealt a crushing blow, but Hiryu still has teeth, and she is about to bite. The Pacific at noon is never still. Smoke still billows from Kaga, Akagi, and Soryu, black plumes clawing the sky. Flames consume decks, fuel spills across the ocean, men leap into the waves as their carriers die. But one ship remains. Hiryu, the 4th carrier of Nagumo's force, untouched, unbroken. steaming north with the wind. Her decks are alive with purpose. Where others have burned, she will strike back. Admiral Yamaguchi Tamon, Hiryu's commander, is a warrior to the core. Stern, uncompromising, his men revere him as both brilliant and ruthless. Watching black, columns of smoke rise from the horizon. He does not falter. "Prepare the planes," he orders. Voices echo the command down the hangars. Crews move with mechanical precision. Bombs are armed, torpedoes loaded, Zero fighters fueled and checked. By 12:20 p.m., Hiryu's first counterstrike is airborne. Dive bombers and fighters climb into the sky, heading straight for the American carriers. The giant has been wounded, but she still has teeth. The American carriers steam east of Midway, their decks crowded with weary mechanics and refueling aircraft. Pilots sip water, scribble notes, prepare for the next sortie. Few suspect how close danger already is. At 12:47, lookouts aboard Yorktown spot black specks on the horizon. The alarm sounds instantly. "Enemy aircraft inbound, bearing 220. Within minutes, the sky darkens with shadows. Japanese dive bombers peel into attack formation, Zeros circling above to swat away interceptors. Yorktown braces for impact. The bombers dive. Screaming engines, whistling bombs, explosions slam into Yorktown's decks. One hits near the funnel, tearing open compartments, smoke belching skyward. Another strikes the forward elevator, blasting fire through the hangar. The ship shudders, reels, then steadies, her crew racing to fight the flames. For a moment, it seems she might not survive, but Yorktown's men are relentless. Damage control teams flood the hangar with foam, smothering flames. Engineers reroute power, patch ruptured lines. Within an hour, her smoke clears, her deck steady. By 2 p.m., Yorktown is back underway. It is a miracle of discipline. But Hiryu is not finished. At 2:30, Yamaguchi launches his second wave, this time torpedo bombers. They skim the waves, their shadows racing across the ocean. Yorktown's lookouts spot them too late. Anti-aircraft guns open fire. Tracers arcing across the water, but the Japanese press in. 2 torpedoes slam into Yorktown's port side. The explosions lift her from the sea, steel twisting, compartments flooding instantly. The ship lists sharply. Men are thrown from ladders, trapped in compartments, dragged under as water surges. Captain Elliot Buckmaster gives the order: abandon ship. Boats are lowered. Men leap into the sea, clinging to rafts slick with oil. Some pray, some curse, some simply stare back at their wounded ship. Yorktown, the carrier that had already survived Coral Sea, now lies dead in the water, her fate sealed. But while Yorktown burns, American scouts have found Hiryu. At 3:30 p.m., Enterprise and Hornet launch their strike. Dauntless dive bombers roar into the sky once more, their pilots grim and determined. They know what 3 burning Japanese carriers look like. They know what one more could mean. By 5 p.m., they are overhead. Hiryu is below, turning hard. Her crew frantically moving aircraft on deck. Lookouts shout, alarms wail, gunners swing upward, tracers streak into the sky. The Dauntlesses dive. Bombs rip through Hiryu's flight deck, exploding among fueled aircraft, igniting fires that sweep the length of the carrier. Secondary explosions roar as torpedoes and bombs in the hangars detonate. Hiryu is engulfed. Her flight deck collapses inward, her bridge shrouded in smoke. Men abandon their posts, leaping into the sea. Within hours, she is a crippled hulk, her flames uncontrollable. The last blade of Nagumo's force is broken. As night falls, the Pacific is littered with wrecks and survivors. Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu already doomed. Hiryu burning, Nagumo's mighty First Air Fleet, the hammer of Pearl Harbor, erased in a single day. Admiral Yamaguchi, true to his code, refuses rescue. He remains aboard Hiryu with his men, saluting as the flames close in. By dawn, the carrier slips beneath the waves, Only scattered destroyers remain to collect survivors, their decks crowded with burned, oil-soaked sailors. Thousands are gone. 4. The Americans. The day is a paradox of triumph and loss. Enterprise and Hornet steam on, battered but alive. Yorktown lies crippled, eventually finished off days later by a Japanese submarine. Hundreds of American aviators are dead, their planes at the bottom of the sea. But the scale of victory is undeniable. 4 Japanese carriers sunk, thousands of Japan's finest aviators gone. The Imperial Navy, once unstoppable, is broken. As the sun sinks over the Pacific, survivors cling to rafts, watching their carriers burn into the night. Smoke columns glow red against the horizon, funeral pyres for ships that once terrorized half the world. The ocean is quiet again, but nothing is the same. The Battle of Midway is over, and in just 5 minutes of fire, the course of the war has been rewritten. June 7th, 1942. The Pacific is calm again. The waves roll endlessly, indifferent to what has happened here. But beneath the still waters lie the corpses of giants: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, 4 carriers, the pride of the Imperial Navy, gone within 24 hours. For the men who lived it, the silence after Midway is louder than the battle itself. On Japanese destroyers, thousands of oil-soaked survivors are hauled from the sea. Their faces are blackened, their eyes blank, their bodies trembling with exhaustion. Some sob quietly. Others sit in silence, staring into nothing. Admirals walk the decks, stunned. The air groups that had leveled Pearl Harbor, the elite strike force of the Empire, are gone. The veteran pilots who once soared unchallenged now lie at the bottom of the Pacific. On June 5th, Admiral Yamamoto, still hundreds of miles away, receives the truth: the carriers are lost. He considers pressing on with battleships, but the risk is madness. The order is given: retreat. It is the first time Japan withdraws in the Pacific War. The tide has turned. For the Japanese High Command, the loss is catastrophic. 4 fleet carriers, over 250 planes, more than 3,000 sailors and aviators, gone. But the true wound is deeper: the irreplaceable loss of trained pilots. Japan's air groups had been forged over years of war in China and the Pacific. They cannot be rebuilt quickly. The First Air Fleet, the hammer of Pearl Harbor, is dead. On the American side, the news spreads with disbelief. In Washington, Navy officials read the dispatches twice, then a third time. Could it be true? 4 carriers destroyed in the mess halls of Enterprise and Hornet. Sailors cheer when they hear the reports. Men slap each other's backs, laugh, weep openly. For months, they had been the hunted, retreating across the Pacific. Now, they are hunters. On Yorktown's shattered hull, however, celebration is muted. The carrier lists badly, her crew already evacuated. Days later, Japanese submarine I-168 slips through American screens and puts 2 more torpedoes into her side. Yorktown finally slips beneath the waves, taking 141 of her crew with her. Even in victory, the price is steep. More than 300 American aviators are dead. Dozens of planes never returned. Families back home will receive telegrams marked missing in action, but everyone knows it was worth it. Historians would later call Midway the turning point of the Pacific War. It is not just the numbers, though the numbers are staggering. It is the momentum. Before Midway, Japan dictated the pace of the war. They struck first, they chose where to fight, they set the tempo. After Midway, the initiative shifts. America is on the offensive. 6 months earlier, Japanese bombers had lit Pearl Harbor in flames. Now, the same fleet that launched that attack lies broken, smoking beneath the waves. The balance of power has changed in just 5 minutes of fire. Yet behind the triumph lies human tragedy. Japanese sailors speak of clinging to wreckage as the carriers burned around them. the screams of trapped comrades echoing in their ears. One recalled, "The sea was on fire. Men swam through flames. I saw friends vanish beneath waves of oil." For the Americans, too, memory is not all victory. Survivors of Torpedo Squadron 8 remember watching every one of their wingmen fall in flames, their sacrifices unreturned. Ensign George Gay, the lone survivor of his squadron, floated in the sea for hours, watching the battle unfold around him, helpless as his friends died. War has no victories without sorrow. In Tokyo, news of the defeat is hushed. Newspapers speak vaguely of heavy losses, but emphasize courage and sacrifice. The truth that 4 carriers are gone is concealed from the public. Families wait for letters that never come. Wives cling to silence. Mothers pray for sons already lost. For Japan, Midway is more than a defeat. It is a shattering of faith. Yamamoto had promised victory, had spoken of decisive battles. Now his decisive battle has come and ended in disaster, in America, the story is very different. Midway electrifies the nation. Newspapers scream headlines of triumph. Radio announcers speak of courage, of sacrifice, of a navy that struck back. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, Americans believe they can win. Factories double their efforts. Shipyards churn out carriers, destroyers, submarines at unprecedented speed. Confidence replaces fear. The war is far from over, but Midway has shown that Japan can be beaten. Midway is remembered not just for ships sunk or planes destroyed, but for what it symbolized. It was a battle of intelligence, codebreakers cracking, Japanese messages, allowing Admiral Nimitz to set the perfect ambush. It was a battle of sacrifice, American torpedo squadrons dying to draw Japanese fighters down. It was a battle of timing, dive bombers arriving at the exact moment when Japanese decks were most vulnerable. It was luck, it was courage, it was destiny, and it happened in just 5 minutes. In the decades after the war, veterans of both sides remembered Midway with awe. Japanese officers spoke of it as the moment the Empire's fate was sealed. American sailors remembered it as the day the tide turned. On the seafloor, the wrecks of the carriers rest still. In 2019, explorers found the remains of Akagi and Kaga lying silent in the darkness. Their decks, once crowded with planes, are now draped in coral. Their guns point at nothing. Their silence tells the story better than words. Midway is no longer just history. It is legend. June 1942. The Pacific stretches wide, endless, and eternal. But its history changed here, in a handful of moments. For Japan, Midway was the beginning of the end. For America, it was the first step toward victory. And for the men who fought, it was everything. Life, death, courage, despair, sacrifice. The battle is over. The carriers are gone. The war rages on. But the memory remains. The Battle of Midway, 5 minutes that changed the world. Before I leave you, share your favorite moment in the comments and hit subscribe so you're here for the next battle.